Formula One is returning to Las Vegas this weekend for the Las Vegas Grand Prix. Of course, it'll be the second running of the event after the first one last year, which was the first in over 40 years. And there was a lot of scepticism going into last year's event, of course, because there was a lot of talk about whether it would be just an entertainment fest and that the racing wouldn't be the centre of the attention. It is true, of course, that Las Vegas is the entertainment capital of the world, so the fact that Formula One was heading back there was obviously a huge deal. But many saw it as the latest example of cash is king in Formula One, and it just being another street race to add to the growing list that are currently on the calendar. Now we're just a few days away from the second running of the Las Vegas Grand Prix. I thought it was the perfect time to ask the question as to whether Vegas has done enough to earn its place on the Formula One calendar based on how last year's event went and its preparations for the 2024 edition. I remember going into last year's race, there was a lot of hype because obviously this was Formula One's first visit to Vegas since the 80s. The last race that was held there was back in 1982. And I think that Formula One was very eager to make this edition, this modern edition of the Grand Prix, everything that the previous one hadn't been back in the 80s, because that first time around really was a disaster. Vegas actually hosted two Grand Prix in the early 80s. The first one was in 1981, followed by the second one, as I mentioned, in 1982. And the track that was used for those two editions really was probably, I would say, one of the worst tracks ever used in Formula One. It was built on a car park at the Caesars Palace, and the layout that was used really was terrible, simply because, first of all, it was very flat and it was very boring. It didn't have a lot of creativity or anything like that about it. And it didn't offer up any good racing, even though both editions that were held in the 80s held title deciders. The championship went down to the wire. But even with the championships on the line in both of those years, nothing could liven up just how dull the racing was, so it's no surprise that the race was dropped. I think in many ways it kind of summarises how Formula One struggled to crack America for so many years. I think it's kind of amazing that now we've got 3 races that are held in the US on the calendar, and that the sport has never been so popular as it is now in that part of the world. First we went to Austin in 2012, and then obviously that was followed by Miami in 2022, and then it was obviously Vegas's turn last year. And I remember when it was announced that it would be on the calendar, returning to the calendar, there was quite a mixed reaction from fans. I think that's because some saw it as just Formula One going to another place that doesn't really have motorsport pedigree and was only interested in the money side of it. And we haven't even got started on the track layout, which initially didn't win over many fans either. But the difference this time around is that there'd be no car parks. F1 would be using instead the famous Vegas Strip as part of the circuit, which would obviously create a hell of a backdrop to Formula One cars racing around in the night time at around 200 miles an hour down the long straight. But then again, there were other sections of the track which didn't really look too inspiring, let's say. So I think at first there was more negativity initially, especially as I think many were looking at it as maybe another example of a circuit coming onto the calendar and not really hitting the ground running and failing to deliver great racing. It was more of just, one of those Mickey Mouse sort of tracks that is too tight for Formula One cars and doesn't offer up great racing. I'll be honest, I was one of those that was quite sceptic about Formula One racing in Vegas, but more so because in the build-up to the race there was so much hype, there was so much promotion going on social media from Formula One trying to hype up this race. And my thought was that if this race doesn't deliver as it should do, if we don't get a good race, then there's only going to be a lot of hate and a lot of criticism from fans. The way the race was getting promoted was only going to ramp up the expectation and the pressure for it to deliver a great race. And I don't think that the opening ceremony on the Wednesday before the race really helped matters. I think we've seen this before at US Grand Prix. We saw it in Austin, of course, and we've seen it in Miami as well, where we have this sort of pre-event before the race. It's very Americanized, which is obviously, Formula One is run by Liberty Media, who of course are an American company. And we've seen in America, in other sports, that this is the kind of thing that they do. So, us as Brits and Europeans, we look at that sort of thing as very cheesy and sort of embarrassing. Do you remember how Max Verstappen thought exactly the same as what we did? He was very vocal and wasn't afraid to hide his true feelings about the pre-race show. I remember in particular one headline where he was quoted as saying that Vegas was just 100% show and 0% sport, which, coming from the reigning world champion, isn't exactly the type of publicity that you'd want. So Max's quote arguably put even more pressure on Vegas to have a weekend that ran smoothly and delivered a banger of a race. But just 10 minutes into the first practice session, if you remember rightly, that Carlos Sainz ran over a drain cover which completely destroyed and ripped the underneath of his Ferrari and resulted in the entire session not only being red flagged but being cancelled. And things only got worse because this would mean that FP2 would obviously be delayed because the officials would need to go around the entire circuit checking every drain cover to make sure that they were all secure, so that something like this wouldn't happen again. And because the session was going to be run so late, early in the morning Vegas time, it meant that no fans were allowed at the circuit, so it really was a complete disaster. So all in all, it couldn't really have gone much worse in terms of how the weekend had started in Vegas, so it really did need to get better and quickly. And do you know what? It did. We had a great qualifying session which was really entertaining. It ran without incident, and even better, we had a bit of a mixed up grid, which obviously always bodes well for the race, so things were looking up. All the stars were out in force for the Grand Prix on Sunday, celebrities lined the grid, the grandstands were absolutely packed. So what we needed now was for the racing to do the talking, and it did just that. We actually got one of the best races of the season. We had Leclerc, Verstappen and Perez all battling for the victory in the last sort of 10-15 laps, and you really did not know who was going to win come the end of the Grand Prix. And on top of that, there was plenty of on-track action and overtaking up and down the field, so it really did blow my mind how great the race was. I think it really did prove a lot of the doubters wrong. It ticked a lot of the boxes, probably ones that I didn't think it was going to tick, but we ended up with a great race. The drivers showed that you can overtake on the circuit, so all in all it was a massive win, not just for Formula 1 but also for Vegas. I think in a way it has kind of eased the pressure on the promoters for this year's race, because now we know obviously that the circuit can offer up great racing, so I think there's only expectation from all of us fans that we're going to have more of the same for 2024. It also looks as though that the opening ceremony won't be repeated this year, which obviously is a good thing, and I'm pretty sure that those drain covers will be fastened down and more secure than last year, just in case. Unlike other street circuits, and there's been quite a fair few from down the years, and some of those have been in the US, such as Dallas and Detroit, Vegas got the most important thing right, and that was the racing. And that's really all that matters to us fans. We want to see great racing, and that's exactly what we got in 2023. So for me personally, I think that's enough of a reason for Vegas to be deserving of its place in Formula 1. How long will it stay in Formula 1? I mean, who knows? But all that matters to me is that if we do continue to race in Vegas for many more years to come, that the racing comes first and that the entertainment on the track outshines the entertainment off it. So there you go, that's it for today's video. Be sure to like the video, and if you are new around here, don't forget to also subscribe to the channel. Thanks for watching guys, and I will see you in the next one. Goodbye.